The moment my daughter stepped up to receive her diploma, the dream our entire family had worked tirelessly to nurture. My husband, my partner of 28 years, turned to me and said, "I want a divorce." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I simply smiled and quietly handed him an envelope. An envelope I had prepared long ago, and inside it was something he never saw coming. A response that left him screaming in despair just days later. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Bianca, a betrayed wife who was anything but weak, a woman who chose clarity over tears and transformed her pain into a perfect plan for retribution. You won't be able to tear your eyes away from the twists and turns of this story, from the graduation celebration to the courtroom and the unexpected reversals no one could have foreseen. If you think this is just another divorce story, you're mistaken. This is a lesson in self-respect, intelligence, and the strength of a woman who rises after being betrayed. The atmosphere in the elegant banquet hall that evening was perfect. A warm, intimate dinner, crystal chandeliers reflecting off champagne flutes, and resounding applause celebrating young Amelia, who had just graduated from a prestigious university with an honors scholarship. She was the pride of her family, the sweet fruit of her parents' years of hard work. Everyone thought this would be one of the most beautiful memories of her life. At the head table, Gregory and Bianca, Amelia's parents, sat amid congratulations and admiring glances. Gregory was a successful businessman, exuding calm confidence and a polished demeanor. Bianca glowed in an elegant emerald green dress, always smiling graciously. After 28 years together, they still appeared as a model couple, at least in the eyes of outsiders. As the dinner reached its peak, Gregory stood, raised his glass, and stepped onto the stage to applause. Everyone assumed he would deliver a heartfelt toast to his daughter and wife, a sweet conclusion to the evening. But no, Gregory smiled, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Bianca. And then he said something that silenced every sound in the room. "I want to thank our family and friends for being here. And I also want to announce that Bianca and I are getting divorced." The words dropped like a bomb. Many were stunned. Some thought they'd misheard. No one understood what was happening. Amelia froze. The festive atmosphere vanished in an instant. All eyes turned to Bianca, but instead of crying or lashing out, she simply nodded and stood. Not a word of reproach, not a pleading glance. Bianca walked onto the stage, gently hugged her daughter, and said, "Today is your day, my love. Always remember that. I'm so proud of you." Then she turned and walked away, passing through hundreds of staring eyes. Her posture was upright, her expression serene, as if she, not anyone else, was in complete control. Gregory stood there, his glass of champagne still in hand, unfinished, unaware that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 months before Amelia's graduation, on a quiet, rainy night, Bianca sat alone in the living room, holding a cold cup of tea. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what had been keeping her awake for weeks, but her instincts told her something was off. Gregory, the husband she had shared nearly 3 decades with, had become distant. Frequent business trips, strange phone calls while he was in the shower, and evasiveness whenever family plans were mentioned. There was no concrete evidence, just a feeling. But for a woman who had shared everything with her husband, even the smallest change rang like an alarm in her heart. Bianca didn't lose her temper. She didn't confront him. She didn't make a scene. She knew that women act in pain, but win when they stay calm. And so, in silence, she hired a private investigator. As a discreet middle-aged woman who had once worked for a law firm, she wasn't the type to pursue sloppy surveillance. After just over 2 weeks, the first photos arrived. Gregory, the ostensibly exemplary husband, was dining at an upscale restaurant with a younger woman. They laughed intimately, held hands, and then left together, disappearing into a familiar hotel. The woman's name was Cassandra, nearly 20 years younger than Bianca. But that wasn't the worst of it. The investigator uncovered more. Gregory had been planning for a long time. not to divorce immediately, but to wait until after Amelia's graduation to avoid ruining her big day. With his polished exterior, he wanted to remain the good father in Amelia's eyes. But to Bianca, this was the height of hypocrisy. She wasn't just betrayed, she was disrespected. Instead of crumbling, Bianca became more clear-headed than ever. She began reviewing their finances. She discovered funds transferred out of their joint accounts for vague reasons. Gifts bought for business partners, travel expenses for work, and receipts that never appeared in the family ledger. For 3 months, Bianca continued playing the role of a devoted wife. She still went grocery shopping, cooked meals, and asked about her husband's day as if nothing was wrong. But inside, she was planning. A meticulous plan, backed by evidence, a lawyer, and a counterstrike. She no longer cried. She was preparing to flip the board. Bianca never imagined that a piece of paper signed nearly 3 decades ago could become her most powerful weapon. It was their prenuptial agreement, something Gregory, then a young, ambitious businessman, had insisted on before their marriage. Back then, Bianca was a high school teacher, living simply and unconcerned with financial matters. She loved Gregory with all her heart, so she wasn't offended when he suggested the agreement. "I just want us to be clear about assets in case something happens," Gregory had said, his tone gentle but calculated. However, it was Bianca who proposed adding a clause. If either party is unfaithful, they will forfeit the majority of financial benefits in a divorce. Gregory agreed without hesitation, perhaps because he never thought he'd cheat, or believed it would never come to that. 28 years later, everything had changed. Sitting across from her private attorney with a thick stack of documents, evidence of infidelity, bank statements, and the prenuptial agreement, Bianca remained silent. The lawyer, an experienced Italian-American woman, reviewed the papers, looked up at Bianca and said, "You have both the weapon and the ammunition, and this agreement is a legal gun." In their state, fidelity clauses in prenuptial agreements were still enforceable if both parties had signed willingly and without coercion. Gregory had no grounds to contest it. The investigators' evidence, suspicious financial transactions, and his recent cold behavior all strengthened Bianca's case. The bitter irony was that Gregory himself had initiated the agreement. He was the one who had been so confident he could always control the situation, that he could leave cleanly after his daughter's graduation. But now, everything he had planned was being turned against him. Bianca was no longer the dreamy young woman of years past. Now, she was a strategist, and that old piece of paper was a sharp blade, hidden up her sleeve for 28 years, waiting for the right moment to be drawn. From the moment she knew Gregory had betrayed her and planned to abandon their family after the graduation, Bianca no longer hesitated. She didn't wallow in grief. She didn't smash things, scream, or air their dirty laundry. She did something few women in her position could. She stayed silent and prepared. Bianca knew Gregory's nature well. He was overly confident, always believing he was smarter than others, that no one would dare challenge him. He thought she would collapse if abandoned. He believed he controlled the timing, the emotions, and their shared assets, and that arrogance became his fatal blind spot. In the first week after gathering sufficient evidence, Bianca quietly hired a top divorce and asset attorney. They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, where no one would recognize them. The lawyer immediately began drafting divorce papers and requested the court freeze their assets to prevent Gregory from hiding them before being served. Within a month, Bianca had reviewed all bank accounts, appraised their real estate, gathered financial evidence, and prepared all legal documents. Everything was neatly organized in a leather briefcase, not to threaten Gregory, but to head straight to court at the moment he least expected. On the morning of Amelia's graduation, while Gregory was tying his tie in front of the mirror and rehearsing his family comes first speech, the divorce petition was officially filed. But Bianca didn't say a word. She stood by her husband during the ceremony, smiled, and maintain the demeanor of a devoted wife, until the moment he destroyed his own reputation. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to flip tables. She just waited. And when Gregory stood before the crowd to announce their divorce, thinking he held the reins, Bianca had already outmaneuvered him, legally, financially, and in dignity. Gregory didn't yet know, right after the party, a court summons would be delivered to him. And that was only the beginning of what he was about to lose. Just 3 days after the graduation, Gregory received the court summons. Contrary to his assumptions, he wasn't the one filing for divorce. Bianca was. The realization left him stunned. In his mind, his docile wife of nearly 30 years would cry, cling, or at least let him take the lead. But no, Bianca had moved first, with a long, calculated step. The court quickly froze all joint assets upon the filing of the divorce petition. Bank accounts were temporarily locked, and access to company shares was restricted. Gregory began to feel suffocated. He never imagined that Bianca not only knew, but had prepared everything in advance, methodically and legally airtight. In the first court hearing, Bianca's lawyer presented clear evidence of infidelity: photos, transaction histories, and crucially, the prenuptial agreement with its fidelity clause. Gregory couldn't deny it. He sat motionless as the opposing counsel read aloud the terms he himself had proposed years ago. The court's ruling was a devastating blow. Bianca was awarded the primary residence, a significant portion of their marital assets, and priority over high-yield investments. Gregory was left with only a small personal account and an old car registered in his name. Worse still, news of the divorce spread quickly in the local business community. Some partners canceled meetings. A few investors pulled out due to lost trust. The gossip wasn't loud, but it was enough to start freezing him out of key relationships. Cassandra, the young mistress Gregory had dreamed of starting a new life with, didn't stick around long. When she realized he had little wealth left, she quietly vanished, without so much as a goodbye. Gregory, the man who thought he'd master the game, was left with nothing but humiliation. His wealth, reputation, mistress, and his daughter's respect all crumbled. He lost, not because of a vicious revenge, but because he underestimated the woman who had once loved him more than herself. After the divorce, many assumed Bianca would retreat into a quiet life, healing from the emotional shock. They were wrong. She didn't just overcome her pain, she transformed it into strength. Initially, Bianca wanted to live peacefully and focus on Amelia, helping her daughter regain stability after the family upheaval. But during long nights alone, she began to think, how many other women out there are being betrayed, abandoned, with nothing to their name? An idea sparked in her heart like a small flame. With the money awarded from the divorce, combined with financial knowledge gained from nearly 30 years in education and managing a household, Bianca decided to open a financial consulting office specifically for divorced women. It didn't need to be grand. It just needed to be right. She didn't just offer advice. She shared her real experiences. In the first 3 months, clients mostly came through referrals from acquaintances. But gradually, the name Bianca, the woman who rose after divorce, spread. Women sought her out not only for financial guidance, but to hear her talk about standing up, protecting self-respect, and preparing for a truly free life. Bianca hired 2 more female employees, both of whom had also experienced broken marriages, to join her. They worked like a quiet but formidable team. Every woman who came was greeted with understanding, not cold numbers. 6 months later, a second office opened in a neighboring city. A local magazine wrote about her with the headline, "From Betrayed Wife to Guide for Women's Independence." Bianca smiled when she read the article, not for the fame, but because she knew she was doing something meaningful. She no longer needed Gregory. She didn't need anyone to validate her worth. She had emerged from the wreckage, not to seek revenge, but to build a better world for herself and other women. In the mirror, Bianca saw a completely new person, no longer weak, no longer waiting for love from others, only strength, freedom, and faith in herself remained. Amelia had been deeply shocked. For her, the graduation was supposed to be a day of pure joy, but it became a memory tainted by separation. Though mature and rational, she couldn't fathom why her father chose that moment to announce the divorce. In the days following the party, Amelia was confused and torn. She didn't know whose side to take. Her love for both parents was deep, but then the truth began to unravel. Not through accusations, but through her mother's, Bianca's, silence, patience, and strength. Not a single complaint. No attempt to drag her daughter into the conflict. Instead, Bianca said only one thing. "You don't need to choose sides, sweetheart. I just need you to live true to your heart." That composure prompted Amelia to look closer. She investigated on her own. And gradually she realized everything her mother had quietly endured, the betrayal, the scheming, and how her mother refused to use pain to hurt others in return. One afternoon, Amelia visited her mother's new office. She watched as Bianca counseled a newly divorced woman, her mother's eyes no longer weary but full of vitality and compassion. After that day, Amelia decided to intern part-time at her mother's office. She wanted to learn, not just about finance, but about how a woman could overcome devastation without losing her dignity. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger than ever. They shared not only their pain, but also new faith and dreams. And Gregory? He tried to reach out to Amelia many times, texting, calling, sending letters, but she didn't respond immediately. She needed time. She didn't hate him, but she no longer admired him as she once had. Gregory seemed to realize that some things, once lost, could never be regained. Reputation could be rebuilt. Wealth could be earned again, but respect and familial bonds, once shattered, left cracks that couldn't be erased. Amelia still loved her father, but the person she now deeply respected was her mother. A year has passed since that fateful evening. The broken pieces of the family have now settled into their rightful places, not whole, but clear enough to tell a story. Who fell, who stood up, and who moved forward. Bianca is no longer Gregory's ex-wife. She's an independent entrepreneur, the founder of a financial consulting network for women post-divorce. Her name is mentioned at conferences. She's invited as a guest on local radio shows. And a publisher is even urging her to write a book about her journey through heartbreak. She hasn't just helped dozens of women regain control of their finances. She's helped them reclaim themselves. Her first office is thriving, the second in a nearby city is stable, and she's scouting locations for a third. Every morning, Bianca steps into her office not with a heavy heart, but with the joy of doing something valuable. And Gregory, his business has scaled back. Some investors turned away after the divorce was exposed, and a few major clients moved contracts to competitors due to lost trust. Gregory lives alone in a small rented apartment, no longer in a mansion, no longer with a mistress by his side. Cassandra vanished completely from his life. No explanation, no phone call. She left as abruptly and coldly as she had arrived. He's tried to rebuild his relationship with Amelia, but she keeps her distance. She hasn't cut him off, but she's not open like before. They occasionally text, but their conversations are polite, never returning to the warmth of the past. Gregory has come to realize, perhaps too late to change, one undeniable truth. He thought he was the one leaving, but he was the one left behind. Bianca's story isn't just a tale of clever retribution or a dramatic divorce. It's a profound wake-up call for any woman who loves, lives in a marriage, or has been hurt by love. First, stay vigilant, not blind. Love is beautiful, but it's not immune to betrayal. Trust is necessary, but handing all power to someone else without preparation, that's naivety that can destroy you. Bianca didn't lose everything because she always retained a measure of control, a measure of awareness. Second, understand the law and use it to protect yourself. No one enters marriage expecting divorce. But if that day comes, you can't walk away empty-handed just because you loved fully. A prenuptial agreement isn't a lack of trust. It's a sign of mutual respect and long-term vision. Third, financial independence is a soft but sharp weapon. Bianca wasn't wealthy before the divorce, but she knew how to manage money and use it wisely. A modern woman doesn't need to be a millionaire, but she must know what she has, what she needs, and how to avoid dependency. Fourth, don't seek revenge with bitterness. Respond with success. Bianca didn't destroy Gregory. She didn't make a scene or retaliate loudly. She chose to rise, to shine, and to become a living testament that you can lose everything, but still stand if you have self-respect. And finally, believe in your own worth, even when others no longer see it. No one can take away your confidence unless you let them. What Gregory thought of Bianca no longer mattered. What mattered was that Bianca knew who she was, and she acted from a place of knowing her value. This isn't just a lesson about marriage. It's a lesson about the inner strength of a woman. A year ago, amid applause and shimmering lights at the graduation, Gregory stood before the crowd and announced the divorce, thinking he held the upper hand. But today, if he looks back, he might realize the only thing he controlled was his own downfall. Bianca, the woman who quietly supported his success for 28 years, didn't scream, didn't cling, didn't retaliate with hatred. She simply walked away with a solid plan, a wounded but unbroken heart, and a soul that retained its kindness. She is a reminder to us all that true strength lies not in loud words, but in the calm when you have every reason to rage. True victory isn't making others regret. It's standing up, living well, and becoming the best version of yourself. If you're going through loss, betrayal, or heartbreak, remember this story. You don't need revenge. You just need to stand and walk toward the light you deserve.